9 years before Europe knew it was going to die, the answer was already written in stone, not in a chronicle, not in a palace. On a flat grey stone half sunk into the earth, in a valley no one puts on a map anymore, there is a name on it. A believer, the stone says, his name was Sanmaq. There is a year, and there is a single word for how he died: pestilence. The year, in our reckoning, is 1338. What began in this valley would kill 1 in every 3 people on a continent. And it would travel there on the roads of the largest empire the world had ever known. This is the story of how the road that connected the world also delivered its greatest killer. But to understand how a death from that valley reached half of Europe, you have to see the roads as they once were. In the 13th century, the Mongols did what no one before them had managed. They did not just conquer the distance between China and the Black Sea. They made it safe. For the first time, a single power held the roads from the Pacific coast all the way to the Crimea. One law, one protection. 9,000 kilometers of it, they ran a relay system called the Yam way stations, set roughly a day's ride apart, with fresh horses, food and shelter waiting. A messenger could hand off and ride on, and news could cross the world faster than ever before. Marco Polo, who traveled these roads, described thousands of stations and hundreds of thousands of horses. The numbers may be a traveler's wonder more than a ledger. But the marvel behind them was real. Merchants moved silk, spices, silver and ideas along a road they no longer feared. They said a young woman could carry gold on her head from one end of the empire to the other and come to no harm. Chinese silk, Persian glass, paper, gunpowder, faiths and languages all moved along the same protected veins. The world had never been this connected. It would not be again for centuries. The same roads that carried the gold were about to carry something no one could see. The plague was not new. The Mongols did not invent it. They opened a door. In the mountains of Central Asia, the disease had long lived, sleeping in the blood of wild rodents, marmots most likely, and the fleas that live on them. Its name is Yersinia pestis. Under a microscope, it looks like nothing at all. A single flea bite is enough to carry it from an animal into a human body. And in 1338, at the foot of those mountains, it made the jump. In one valley, the first people began to die. And then the door the Mongols had opened let something walk through it. The roads that were built for trade now did what roads do. They carried. Only this time it was not silk. It moved the way everything moved, station by station, caravan by caravan, year by year. No one saw it happen. There was no single moment, no burning city to mark the way. Just a fever here, a death there, a caravan that reached the next station 1 man short. In 2022, geneticists read the family tree of the plague itself. And a strain from that valley sits right at the root, the single knot from which all the later waves branch out. For the researchers, this is the source, the direct ancestor of the plague that would drown Europe. Some of their colleagues are more careful and call it a close cousin. But either way, the trail begins here on a stone with a name. And after 8 years and 4,000 kilometers, the trail reaches the sea, a harbor on the Crimean coast, Caffa. Caffa was a Genoese trading city on the edge of the Mongol world. In 1346, the Golden Horde came to its walls, led by their Khan, Jani Beg, but the siege turned. The plague reached the army before the army could take the city. It moved through the camp faster than any assault, and the horde began to die in its thousands. And here the legend begins, the story almost everyone tells, that before they left, the Mongols loaded their own plague dead into their siege engines and hurled the corpses over the walls into the city, one of the first recorded attempts to weaponize disease. It is a terrible image. It has been repeated for 600 years, but the man who wrote it down was never there. And the truth is quieter than the legend. Quieter and worse. The siege ended. The blockades lifted, the harbors opened, and the grain ships sailed again. The plague did not need a catapult. It needed a sack of grain, a rat, and a single flea. The catapult is the story people told because a sack of grain makes no legend. The real weapon was trade, and it had just set sail. In October of 1347, the same ships that had sailed from Caffa reached the harbour of Messina, in Sicily. 12 Genoese galleys, the crews were already dying. Some were already dead. From there it did not march. It spread. Genoa, Pisa, Florence by the spring, France, Spain, England before the next summer was out. It emptied streets and closed harbours and turned neighbours into strangers overnight. The physicians who came wore long robes and held sweet herbs to their faces, and it saved none of them. By the time it passed, somewhere between a third and a half of the people were gone. Whole cities were cut in half. Florence never looked the same again. They buried them in layers, in pits faster than the ground could take them. And the living began to look for someone to blame. Some marched from town to town, whipping their own backs bloody, begging heaven to lift the punishment. Others turned on their neighbours. Across the Rhineland, Jewish communities were accused of poisoning the wells. They had poisoned nothing. But in town after town they were driven out or killed outright. Fear did what the plague could not reach, and it did it with human hands. The empire that built the road did not outlive its cargo by long. The Khanates broke apart. The Golden Horde faded. Of the largest land empire in history, almost nothing was left to see. But the plague it carried remade the world it left behind. So many workers were gone that the survivors could suddenly name their price. Wages rose, food grew cheap. The old bond between lord and peasant simply broke. England tried to freeze it by law twice, and failed both times. Free labour movement, a rising middling class, the ground shifted toward a new age paved by the dead, and something quieter cracked as well. The church had promised prayer and protection, and the dying had come all the same. Faith did not vanish. But into the cracks crept doubt and questions and a new hunger to understand the world for oneself. And we only know where it all began because of a stone and a name upon it. We know because Sanmaq's grave still stands, and because the plague survived in the teeth of the dead, buried there for 700 years, waiting to be read. The empire is dust, the horde is dust, the man on the stone is dust. But what they breathed out into the world, we are still living in it.